Hey everybody, my name is Ria and I am delighted that I get to share my research with you. This term my research focused on the embassy move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem from the perspective of American politics, and it began with a very basic overview of the history of modern Israel. In a nutshell, if ever there was such a thing to describe Israeli-Palestinian relations, the modern controversy over the status of Jerusalem truly rests on a bed of two pillars. One, divergent narratives over the ownership of Palestine, and two, conceptions of the relative importance of statehood to Muslims and Jews for a religious community. The fruits of these pillars blossom into what everyone seems to argue about today, which is largely the territorial acquisitions that Israel made during the War for Independence in 1948 and the Six-Day War in 1967, which ultimately brings about our question of Jerusalem and who owns it. Since Israel annexed Jerusalem during the 1967 Six-Day War, the international community looks upon that territorial conquest as illegal and won't recognize an undivided Jerusalem under Israeli sovereignty, an opinion that the U.S. has maintained as well. Indeed, every president since Truman has maintained neutrality on the issue. However, the American Congress has not. Since 1984, Congress has consistently passed resolutions and bills that would urge the president to recognize Jerusalem as the undivided capital of Israel. But the issue moved beyond symbolism into legal requirements in 1995 with the Jerusalem Embassy Act. The bill states that the policy of the United States be that Jerusalem should be recognized as the capital of Israel, and that the U.S. Embassy should be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem no later than May 31st, 1999. Should this not happen, Congress would withhold half of the State Department's construction funds. But the bill also included a waiver that presidents could sign in the interest of national security, postponing the move for up to 6 months, which all presidents, including Trump, have done. The interesting thing to note about this is that while signing the waiver to postpone the move, all recent presidents have been actively avoiding the fulfillment of a campaign promise to be the one to move the embassy. So what's up with that? The obvious answer is national security and legal concerns over the territory Israel gained during the wars. Its desire to participate in peace talks as an honest broker, the United States' desire, and other considerations to consider, including oil and terrorism in the modern age. So that's well and good. But if Congress passed a law, aren't presidents required to abide by that law? Technically, no, as you are all well aware. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution grants the powers of foreign policy to the president. And presidents have invoked this part of the Constitution in their refusal to abide by congressional mandates that they recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital. The wrangling over these congressional mandates, which there were many during this time period, came to a head in Zivotofsky versus Kerry, which argued the constitutionality of Section 214D of the 2003 Foreign Relations Authorization Act. Among other things, the act, which received overwhelming bipartisan support in Congress, maintained congressional commitment to relocating the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem and provided an avenue for U.S. citizens born in Jerusalem to claim Israel as their place of birth on their U.S. passports. The case forced the court to address whether the Constitution allows Congress to participate in matters related to recognition, or is the matter of recognition the exclusive domain of the president. In a vote of 6-3, SCOTUS found in favor of the president. The findings of this case, Zivotofsky versus Kerry, highlight the ways in which this question over international policy affects federalism in American politics, but it also reveals that presidents are allowed to enjoy unilateral power over recognition per the Constitution. So, Trump's decision to move the embassy must have been his regardless of Congress's input. I wanted to know if other domestic factors could have contributed to this historic move. I began with public opinion and found that Americans, while supporting Israel generally, are definitely against the embassy move, thinking that it will destabilize the Middle East. I reconsidered Congress, not because they have any real authority over the issue, but because they continue to favor the embassy move through recent resolutions that gained bipartisan support, and Trump could be using the move to court congressional favor. I then checked with interest groups, a bane or a blessing to the American public depending on who you talk to. The move mostly made pro-Israeli groups happy and pro-Palestinian groups upset, which surprised nobody. But I found these hypotheses about the influence of interest groups and courting congressional favor and public opinion to be somewhat shallow in consideration of Trump's somewhat erratic behavior, his disregard for driving between standard lanes, and his disinclination to pander to other political elites. What the research seems to indicate is that the embassy move falls in line with Trump's persona as a CEO turned president, who commands and arbitrates deals when the opportunity is ripe and the partners are suitable. Sure, Trump could have been acting from a degree of self-preservation, looking for a win on a campaign promise and repairing relations between the executive and legislative branches. But that is not mutually exclusive with the notion that he could legitimately see the two-state solution as unattainable, and see no reason to waste time pursuing an option that has led to stalemate for over half a century, which he alluded to in his remarks on the move. Additionally, he could have perceived the move to be the right deal, at the right time, and with the right partners. My conclusion is that Trump's style has puzzled the American public, frustrated the legislative branch, angered the international community, and even raised global tensions in parts of the world where peace is an enigma. His decisions as president have earned accusations of dictator at worst, and at best a president who takes an expanded view of the powers given to the office by the Constitution. So the U.S. Embassy Act, or the U.S. Embassy move from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, poses the question to the American public of what this move implies about the American presidency. My answer? Nothing. Trump's influence and activities have not fundamentally altered the role of the president because he has done nothing to substantially expand the role of president beyond pushing against boundaries set by the Constitution and held up by equally ambitious representatives in Congress who push back. Presidents who have made changes to the role of president have done so through philosophy and by influencing how Americans understand their rights and the basic symbols that define their mores. Trump's actions, angering the international community, dividing the domestic factions, and threatening peace in the Middle East, are all actions that have been taken by his predecessors. He may work outside business as usual in Washington and use Twitter in an alarming fashion, but at the end of his presidency, the United States Constitution will hold, and the next elected president could take an entirely different route. Sensationalizing his actions as catastrophic and permanent does little to help anyone understand the implications of this move. I suggest instead taking the long view of history. Thank you all very much for listening.